In this session, we're going to be starting a discussion on digital imaging in photography. And we're going to start by looking at this guy here, Joseph Nicephore Niepce. He was a French man who is given the credit for inventing photography. And this was his first picture. Now, what was he taking a picture of? He was taking a picture of this. And sort of looks like that, okay? Now, how did he do this? He was using this thing called a camera obscura, which I'm not going to get into the technology of this. I am going to point out, you can see that you put a little hole in there, the sun shines in, and it helps you create this image. And so this is called camera obscura, and you use a heliography, which is, using the sun to write things. It took him 8 hours of exposure to get to this picture. Okay. And I just want to compare today, there's a couple of links that you can go to look at some digital photography websites. But the thing I want to point out here is the exposure of 1/500th of a second now compared to 8 hours. Okay. So now these are a picture here of some of our contemporary photography devices. I do want to point out that the iPhone is in the middle for a reason, and that is because these other ones are all cameras. The iPhone is a smartphone that has sort of taken over this industry, which we'll see as we go through this. So let's talk a little bit about the history of this, how we got to the point where we are now. Thomas Wedgwood was an early inventor. He created an image by having the sun bake the image onto a piece of metal. Because the issue here is this. Niepce created the picture. The trouble was recording it on something. We didn't have paper. We didn't have film. At the time, they didn't know how to record it, how to keep the images. He used a heliograph, which was the sun trying to burn it onto burn the image into some kind of device, a metal device mostly. Louis Daguerre, who's also another Frenchman in 1838, was able to get that exposure down to 7 minutes. Pretty good on that. He created this thing called the Daguerre type, which is still used. It's metal plates that reverse the image of something when you take it. They're still used. You still see them sometimes around. In 1850, ambrotype came in, and that was when you're burning the images instead of on metal, onto glass. And then in the 1860s, we started burning them onto tin, very cheap and thin piece of tin, and that's a thin piece of iron, which is a piece of tin. They actually could see the photographs. All the photographs you see from the Civil War, for example, would probably be tin type photographs. Now, another development in the world of cameras was the idea of negatives. We use negatives in film, where the actual negative is the opposite of what you're going to see, but it is a film that you can actually create other copies of the picture on paper, on film paper. So that they were used a lot in the 20th century. When people were using a lot of film. We don't use negatives anymore. But they came about as early as 1834 when they first started thinking of photography as an art. They used negatives. The calotype plus the ambrotype, which I said came out in 1850, was a wet glass plate negative that was used for some time, not a long time. The dry plate glass negative was invented by a man named George Eastman. And George Eastman, big invention, was the celluloid film. And he will go into the film business and make a lot of money and have a huge company up in Rochester, New York. But anyway, he created celluloid film, which is what the Edison used when he was recording things, both video and audio was recorded on celluloid. So the first films that we would see, we used to call films celluloid because that was what they were made out of, celluloid. So, okay, so the first camera was called a Kodak, and that was sold by the Eastman Company. Now, in the 20th century, we got into using film. And so you would buy rolls of film. Usually they would be like They would be in like 12 exposures, 24, 36. They were always in like 12 in some kind of factor of 12. I don't know why, but they were. Now, jumping ahead, this is some of the cameras. Kodak was the first one, and these are some of the other brands of cameras which you'll be familiar with. Canon has 23% of the market. This is in 2023, so it may be a little bit out of date, but it's probably pretty consistent. Sony is at 18%, Nikon at 13%, Panasonic, et cetera. And then there's a bunch of off brands that make up about a third of the market. Those are the camera brands. Now, I want to point this out to you. This is an interesting kind of graph. And again, it just goes to 2018, but it's going to give you the idea that I want to get across. In the blue, we have cameras with built-in lenses, and in the red are cameras with interchangeable lenses, which would be more like the Nikons and the Canons, etc. Now, what I want to point out is that if you look at 2010 and go from there, you can see that it's a downward curve all the way down. Okay, one little blip there from 2016-17, there was an increase. But this is showing you that the camera sales have decreased. Okay, which is an important thing to keep in mind. Camera sales have decreased. Okay, but there's another part to this. Okay, let's look at it a slightly different way here. This shows you the cameras, the sale of cameras from the Camera and Imaging Products Association. This is an organization of members, manufacturers of cameras. You can see from 1951 their sales. They went up gradually over the years. People buying cameras, people having cameras. And they peaked at about 2010, and then there's a nosedive, and that was thanks to smartphone. Smartphone came in existence in 2007, 2008, in that area. And so by 2010, people were taking a lot of pictures on their phones. Keep in mind that what made a smartphone in part was having a camera on it. Because the original cell phones didn't have cameras on them. Okay, now, speculation is that there's 1.2, I used to say billion, now I say trillion, photos are taken each year. I don't know how we would count this. I can take 50 photos of my picture, while we're sitting in class. I don't know where this number is coming from. I think what we want to point out here is there's a lot of pictures taken. People take a lot of pictures because they're taking them digitally on their phones. Okay. Now, how does this all work? Okay. It's on your phone. It used to be on film. Now, the film, of course, when you had film, you used to have to take the film to the drugstore someplace and get it developed. It took you 2 or 3 days. Now with digital, you have it immediately. Okay. But take a look here is that the key components are the film sensitivity to light, or if it's not a film, it's a sensor. In a digital phone, it's a sensor, not a film. Shutter speed is crucial. The longer you have the exposure, the more light comes in. Usually, the worse your picture is going to be, depending on unless you're a professional photographer, you know what you're doing, and you're trying to do some really kind of artsy kind of thing. So the exposure is important. Niepce did it 8 hours. Today we do it 1/500th of a second. Very different. Now, in 1947, Edward Land, who was working for Polaroid, came up with an instant camera, which you could take a picture and you could wait 60 seconds, pull it out, and you would have your picture. And the thing in your camera, you just pulled it out, and there was your picture. You had it on a hard copy. It went to eventually developed to where it was only 10 seconds and then zero time by 1972. But by 2009, Polaroid had to stop making these analog products because nobody was buying them. They didn't keep up with the times. So now what they do is they sell digital imaging products. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop right here, and I'll pick this up a little bit later as we move on next time to talking more about digital photography. But for right now, we're going to stop, and I'll start back again in a while.